Hi there, my name is Darren, and growing up I struggled to get my parents to ever notice me. They were always way more focused on giving my older brother Brandon attention and praise. It was absolutely infuriating. I would study extremely hard and do my absolute best and get perfect grades, but they would instead fawn over Brandon and how well of an athlete that he was. I think that they were hoping that he would make it to the big time and become a professional athlete, and that he would share his wealth with them once he did.
Oh, Brandon, you were amazing in last night's game. Without you, your team would have lost for sure, but you managed to get them the win.
Your mom is right. You carried your team the entire game. We're very proud of you. Thanks, guys. But I had no doubt that I would do well. That other team was weaker than Darren. Hey, what's that supposed to mean? Oh, be quiet, Darren. Let your brother enjoy his win. No matter what happened, they were always doing and saying things like that. Like when our report cards were sent out, they would praise Brandon and put me down. Good job, Brandon. You managed to improve your average. You only got 1D on this report card. Yeah, I really struggled to do better than last time, and it shows. But you got mostly C's. What about my report card? I managed to get the highest marks in the entire class.
No one likes someone that brags all the time, Darren. Maybe if you would go to the gym from time to time and make a sports team like your brother, we would actually care a bit more.
Mom's right. You can get all the good grades you want, but you're still fat and ugly, Darren, and that's the only thing that actually matters. It hurt for them to say such things, especially since I knew that some of it was true. I was quite a bit overweight, and I had never been very lucky with women, so I had always assumed that I was ugly. It really hurt my self-esteem, and I didn't see any way of making things better. So instead, I just focused on what I was good at, and that was studying really hard. I knew that no matter what I did, that it would never matter to my parents or Brandon, and so I just ignored them. Later, when it was time for Brandon and I to go off to college, we both managed to get scholarships. He got a football scholarship while I got an academic one. And of course, our parents only praised him for his while they basically ignored me. Once the two of us went off to school, I focused on getting my degree in computer science while Brandon just partied and played football. My parents raved about the games that Brandon's team won and ignored the fact that he was beginning to party more and more. To me, it looked like he was drinking a bit too much, but they didn't see it and just kept praising him. During his senior year, there were several scouts for major teams that were watching him play, and unfortunately tragedy struck during one game where he was tackled and became injured. It was so bad that he was forced to sit out for the rest of the season and was unable to play any games, which made all the scouts lose interest in him. As a result, he became depressed and began drinking even more and was only rarely ever sober. Mom and Dad, I'm a bit worried about Brandon. He might be an alcoholic and might need serious help.
Oh, just stop it. You're just jealous of your older brother. You just watch. Once he heals, he'll be back playing, and then he'll get scouted and play for a professional team. Then you'll eat your words.
There was no convincing them, and so I just focused on graduating, and once I did, on getting a full-time job so that I could move out. Once I was out on my own, things started to get better for me. My new work colleagues were such a good influence on me, and I started hanging out with them, and even going to the gym with them as well. Before long, I started to lose weight and gain confidence, and I even started dating. Back in high school, I found that the girls back then were only ever interested in the guys who played sports, but the women that I was meeting were much more mature, and were more interested in people that were nice and fun to be around. Before long, I had a girlfriend, and was actually very happy and feeling really good about myself. That is, until my parents called and reminded me about why I hadn't spoken to them in a long time. Darren, we need you to come home immediately. Hey guys, I can, but what's wrong? Why the urgency?
It's your brother. His liver is failing, and we need you to donate a large portion of your liver to him.
Wait a minute. What happened? Is it because of his drinking problem? It doesn't matter what caused it. He needs a portion of your liver, and his life is far more important than yours. Just get to the hospital and make preparations in case things don't work out. What do you mean by that? Is there a lot of risk for him?
Yes. If he doesn't get this transplant, then he'll die. And there is a chance that taking a portion of your liver might end up killing you, but that's a risk that needs to be taken. If he doesn't get this transplant, then there is no way that he'll make to the professionals.
Hold on, I'm not giving up my life just to give him a new liver that he will ruin with his addiction. If you two had listened to me and gotten him help, then this wouldn't even be an issue. The answer is no.
How could you be so incredibly selfish? Your brother is in need and you're refusing to help him? Your life is pathetic. All you do is play on a computer all the time while your brother has a chance to make something of himself and actually have a future. Unlike you, who won't amount to anything except maybe becoming the world's fattest man.
I had enough of their abuse, and so I lashed out at them. Not that it matters, but I'll have you know that I lost most of my weight and I'm in the best shape of my life. Not only that, but I have a girlfriend that is pretty enough to be a supermodel and smart enough to win the Nobel Prize. And maybe I don't make as much money as a professional athlete, but I do make over $150,000 a year. And the house that I bought for myself is huge. You always put me down growing up, and I never had the courage to stand up to you. Well, that ends today. Don't ever call me again. And just like that, I hung up on them. I did feel guilty for not helping my brother, but he had no one to blame for his current situation other than himself. And the fact that my parents wanted to use me to bail him out was inexcusable. I did look up the procedure that they had wanted me to take part in, and the success rate for the person that received the transplant was very low, and the risk for the person that was donating the organ was incredibly high. My parents fully expected me to gamble with my life on the slim chance that it would benefit Brandon, and I wasn't willing to take that risk. Over the next few weeks, though, my parents kept calling me back and begged me to change my mind, and I eventually had to block their numbers so they couldn't harass me anymore. I even had to go so far as place a restraining order against them, as they began to come to my house and beg me when they couldn't reach me by phone. However, they eventually stopped trying to bother me, and I assumed that something had happened. Later, I found out that my father reluctantly had donated a portion of his liver, and that he nearly died on the operating table. But thankfully, the surgery was a success, and that both he and Brandon would recover. The only problem was that my parents still refused to acknowledge that Brandon needed help, and once he was well enough to do so, he went back to his old habits and started drinking heavily again. Because of his drinking problem, he was kicked out of college, and he lost his scholarship, and along with it, all of his hopes of ever playing professional sports. My parents were devastated and became absolutely miserable, as they had placed all their hopes and dreams on Brandon's success. So much so that they hadn't saved a penny for their retirement and are forced to keep working well past the age where they should have retired. My father has even picked up a second job as a janitor to make ends meet, since they lavish Brandon with their savings. As for Brandon, he isn't very well, and he leeches off of our parents. Being a college dropout, he wasn't able to get a job that paid well. He cleans people's houses, but he still spends most of his paycheck on alcohol, and every time I see him, he looks worse and worse. I'm doing great, however. My girlfriend has since become my wife, and we are expecting twins in a couple of months. Although we've both decided that we are going full no contact with my family, and that although it will be hard on them, my children will never know their grandparents, but that's really for the best. I learned that family is very important, but that the family I was born into was incredibly toxic compared to the one that I made with my lovely wife. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. My name is Kamal, and I have met lots of people that have told me that they had a rough life. But believe me when I say that mine has been incredibly rough so far. For starters, my grandparents on both sides of my family passed away before I was even born. But they did make sure that my parents were well taken care of. Neither my mom nor dad had any siblings, and so when their parents passed away, they got quite a large inheritance. For a while, my parents were very happy and were smart about their finances. Unfortunately, not long after I turned 8, my mother became very ill and passed away. It was devastating to me, and I didn't really understand why my mom was no longer around. It took me years of therapy before I was able to accept that she wasn't coming back. My father did his best, of course, and he always made sure that I had everything I needed while trying not to spoil me too much. We were very close, so when I was 15 and he told me that he was thinking about dating again as he was lonely, I gave him my blessing. At the time, though, I never would have guessed how bad of a decision it would end up being. He went on a few dates here and there, but he couldn't find anyone that measured up to my mom until he met Casey. Casey was very patient and had a great sense of humor. When my father introduced me to her, I could tell that he was madly in love with her, and I knew instantly that they would very likely get married, and sure enough. A year later, they had a large ceremony and invited everyone that they knew to celebrate. Part of me wondered if they were going a bit overboard with how much they spent on the wedding, but it was Casey's first marriage, and my father wanted to make it special. Time passed by and we became a family, although I could never get as close to Casey as I had done with my father, and to be honest, it felt like she preferred it that way. Not long after the wedding ceremony had ended, I began to feel Casey being distant with me, almost as if she wanted my father all to herself. Surprisingly, my father never noticed though, and then tragedy decided to come pay us another visit. The day that I came home from school and found my father crying on the couch with Casey trying to comfort him will live in my memory forever. Whoa, what happened? Is everything okay?
No, Kamal. I'm afraid I have some terrible news. I went to the doctors today and they told me that I have cancer and that I have only 4 months to live.
My world was shattered. Not only had I lost my mother, but now I would lose my father as well. It was completely unfair. And the thing that made it even worse was that Casey was smiling. Every time my father would look at her, the smile would disappear. But once he looked away, it would return. It made her look like a devil. A few weeks later, my father's illness forced him to stay in bed as it drained all his energy. Casey had hired a nurse to help take care of him. It was around that time that I tried to connect with her more, as I assumed that once my father was gone, that it would be just the two of us. But I had that completely wrong. Hey Casey, how are you holding up? How's Dad feeling today?
Oh, you're still here?
What's that supposed to mean?
Isn't it obvious? As soon as your father is dead, your butt is out that door forever. I only married him for his money, and now that he's going to be out of the picture, there's no reason to keep you around.
The audacity of this woman. She had been acting the entire time and had convinced my father and I that she was a genuinely good person. And now that my father was on his deathbed, she was revealing her true colors. I wanted to run straight to my father and tell him all this, but part of me didn't want to burden him with this information. He had so little time left, and I didn't want him to spend his last days saddened by being betrayed by Casey. I had faith that my father would protect me even after he had passed, and if it meant that his last days would be comfortable, then I didn't care how much money Casey would receive. Somehow, I knew that I would endure, and that although it would be incredibly hard, that I would be okay. However, months after my father had passed away, Casey still hadn't kicked me out of the house. I knew something was up, but I had no idea exactly what until my father's lawyer came to our house to read us a copy of his will. As it turned out, my father left Casey our house and $100,000, but left the remainder of his fortune to me, which totaled in the tens of millions of dollars. But the catch was that I couldn't touch it until I was 25. There was one exception though, and that was so long as I was living at home with Casey, and if I could prove that she needed the money, then I could withdraw from my trust fund to help her. When I heard that, I instantly knew that that was the reason that I hadn't been kicked out. Casey was banking on me giving her more money. After that, Casey began to act very sweet and polite to me, but I saw right through her act.
Hello, Kamal. I was going to make lasagna. I know how much you love it.
Casey, it's no use. I know why you're being nice, and I know why you haven't kicked me out yet. You can stop pretending.
Well, is that so? Fine then, we can do this the more fun way. Listen, you either give me money when I ask for it, or else I'm going to make your life a living hell until you're 25. Do you understand?
At the time, I felt confident that I would be able to just leave and never have to deal with her. But she had managed to drain my bank account somehow. And without money, I wouldn't be able to afford a place to live on my own. To make matters worse, every time I tried to get a job, she would find a way to sabotage it. Sometimes she would tell my prospective employer that I did drugs, or that I was a part of a gang, and so no one would hire me. So, without a job and without money, I was indeed stuck living with her. I even tried to access my trust fund, but Casey had convinced the bank that I was lying about what I needed the money for. There was nothing that I could do. She held all the power. Over time, she began demanding thousands of dollars. And if I didn't give her the money, then she would do things like cutting holes in my clothes, or breaking my belongings, or not buying food for the house. She would eat out at restaurants, while I would starve at home. Occasionally, I would stay with friends when things got particularly nasty, but the more I did that, the more she would attack me. The worst was when she would find something that belonged to my parents, and she would use it as a hostage to force me to sign over money from my trust fund. I hated her for it, and I knew that if I didn't do something that she would end up burning through my future inheritance. And so, I came up with a plan and contacted the lawyer that had read us my father's will and told him that if he would help me, that I would give him $1 million once I turned 25, and that I would be willing to sign a contract in order to make it official. Not surprisingly, he agreed to help me. But what did surprise me was the fact that he was willing to do it for far less. As it turned out, he was an acquaintance of my father, and upon hearing what I was going through, it made him angry, and so we got to work setting up a sting operation. While Casey was out of the house, we hired people to place cameras all over the house, along with microphones as well. It didn't take long before those started revealing some very good results, as Casey was unable to go more than 2 days without abusing me in some way. We had footage of her denying me food and destroying my belongings. There was even footage of her slapping and kicking me. All of that was well and good, but sending her to prison wasn't enough for me. I needed to make her suffer a bit more, and so I asked my new lawyer friend to draft up some paperwork and hid it among some school paperwork. Hey, listen, I know you don't care about stuff like this, but my school is going on a field trip. Don't worry, it's free, but I need you to sign this form since technically you're my guardian.
Okay, I will, but in exchange I want another $10,000.
Fine, I guess so. What on earth are you doing with all this money anyways?
These clothes aren't cheap, you idiot. Plus, I need to eat well and dress well for when I go to the casino. After all, eventually I'll bleed you dry, and I need to find another rich sucker to rope in.
She was so focused on the money that she didn't even look at the paperwork that she was signing. The only thing that she paid attention to was the check that I gave her, which of course was caught on camera, which would be important later if she realized what she had done and tried to go back on the deal. You see, the documents weren't for a class field trip. They were emancipation papers, which removed her from being my legal guardian. And as an added bonus, there was paperwork that would transfer the ownership of the house from her name to my own in exchange for $10,000. She had unknowingly sold the house to me for less than a fraction of what it was worth. But that still wasn't enough for me, so one night, when she stumbled home drunk and passed out, I had my lawyer hire a van and paid the driver handsomely to drive her as far as he could before she woke up and realized what was going on. Before they left, I made sure to take her phone and purse so that she had no means of getting back except to walk back. Then while she was gone, I had the locks on the house changed and filed a restraining order against her, and used all the videotape evidence to prove that she was abusing me. By the time that she finally made it back, a whole day later, she was exhausted, hungry, and looked like she had walked miles through a garbage dump. It made me so happy to see her struggle to try to get into my house, only to be dragged away by the police. Watching them drive away with her struggling and screaming in the back seat almost felt worth it, except she had wasted a large amount of money by then. My inheritance was still much larger, but it was the fact that she had scammed my father and had tortured me just in the pursuit of our money. However, there was something of a silver lining. Once she was processed at the police station, they determined that Casey wasn't even her real name. It was only an alias and one of dozens that she had used throughout her life. Nope, her real name was Olivia, and she had stolen money from dozens and dozens of people, and had always slipped away before she was caught. She was a professional con artist, and I had finally helped all those people that she had wronged to finally get justice. When she went to trial, the judge gave her the max sentence for each of her crimes, and when they were added up, she would spend the rest of her life in prison without the possibility of parole. And since she was only in her early 30s, that would be a very, very long time as well. She will end up dying in jail, penniless, miserable, and knowing that I was the one that finally put her there. As for me, well, my lawyer became my legal guardian and helped teach me about how to live on a budget, and even helped to tutor me so that I could eventually go to law school when I was old enough. By the time I was 25, I had just graduated, and just as I had promised, I did pay my lawyer what he had asked for, which was my dad's Corvette. Apparently, he had sold it to him years ago and had always regretted doing so. Since I had no attachment to the car, and I knew that he did, it was really not that hard of a decision to make. So here I am now, more or less at the beginning of my life. I'm rich, and I have a great career ahead of me. I also have an amazing house and a pretty good head on my shoulders. Some people would call me the luckiest man on earth, but I would trade all of it just to have my parents with me. Sometimes I do get sad thinking about it, but I know that they wouldn't want that for me. So instead, I've decided to dedicate my life to helping people. I intend to make them proud, and each time I make someone else's life a bit better, I know that they are smiling down at me and giving me their approval. Thanks for watching. Please like the video.
My name is Minji, and I'm 25 years old. I'm a Korean American, and I met my husband at college. We were both studying mechanical engineering, and we fell in love over an elective, global engineering. We dated for a year, and then he introduced me to his mother. That was enough for a lifetime. She made it immediately clear that she didn't like me. She didn't like anyone who wasn't a white American. We were out at a restaurant for dinner, just me, her, and my at-the-time boyfriend, Kenny.
Mom, this is Minji. Minji and I are in class together.
I didn't know you were studying maths.
I was struck dumb by the comment. It didn't make any sense at first, but then I noticed her sneering at me, and I realized she was making a racist comment.
Mom, we're both studying mechanical engineering. A lot of that is maths. You know that.
Yes, well, I think any time one of her kind is allowed into university for maths-based subjects, it's stealing a placement from someone who really deserves it. Do you know what I mean?
Not at all. My kind?
Asian, of course.
Right. And why don't deserve a place as much as anyone else?
Ha! Right. You've got a genetic advantage. My son had to actually work to get into his degree.
Mom, you can't just... What are you trying to say? Minji studied hard, like everyone did. I can't believe you're saying these things.
It's common knowledge, Kenny, that these Asian types have maths hardwired into their brains. They don't have to work for anything. And also, I want my grandkids tall.
I've never heard such drivel, but rest assured that I won't sit here and continue to listen. You're just a racist, and I don't want anything to do with you.
Good. That means you can leave my son alone.
No, Mom. I like Minji. I'm not going to stop dating her just because you say so.
Of course you will, Kenny. I am your mother. You have to do what I tell you to.
Don't be insane. I'm 20 years old. I can do what I want. And until you give up this depraved attitude.
I was so impressed with Kenny's attitude. He took my hand and we left the restaurant. When we got to the dorms that evening, he kissed me.
I love my mom, but I don't tolerate those attitudes. I never even knew she thought those things. But if she doesn't apologize, then I just won't meet with her again.
You don't have to do that.
Of course I do. I like you. And I love my mom, but I hate people who think and behave like that. I have a zero-tolerance policy, you might say.
I knew I had found the love of my life then and there. We kept dating, graduated together, and then we both worked an internship at the same company that got us kick-started on our careers. By 23, we had an apartment, a job, and an endless future that we were ready to embrace. Kenny took me to my favorite park and got down on one knee.
Minji Peterson, you have kept me happier than I ever knew I could be. You've been a rock. You've been a light. You've been a constant. And I love you so much. Please, marry me?
I took the ring on my finger, and then he took me in his arms. I was elated. I wanted to spend all of my life with him, and he had finally proven to me that he felt the same way. We were preparing to marry the next year, by the time we were both 25. It was this decision that inspired me to talk to him about his mother again. He hadn't spoken to her in years, and although he never complained about it, I could tell that it was bothering him. I called her, I knew what she wanted, but I also knew that she wanted her son back too.
You're still together then?
Yes. Kenny asked me to marry him and I said yes. We love each other. We're going to spend the rest of our lives together, and I know that he misses you. I wanted to give you the opportunity to talk to him.
How sweet of you. Unless this is a trick?
No trick. Just an attempt to help you and your son reconnect. You deserve another chance.
Fine. But first I want to meet you, to apologize.
Right. Well, when and where? She wanted to meet the next week. I was keen to put this behind us, but I also didn't want to keep anything from Kenny. So I told him about the meeting. He promised to stay out of the way, but he didn't want me to go alone, just in case she got verbally abusive with me. Kenny drove us to the address and decided to go into the restaurant earlier. so he could hide in a different booth and watch over us. When I showed up 10 minutes later, she still wasn't there. I waited, and then a waitress came over.
I'm sorry, but we just got a message from the woman who was due to meet you. She said she's sorry but can't meet with you today. She's paid for this drink for you, though. It's a Cosmopolitan. Do you want to move to the bar?
Oh no, thank you. My fiancé is just over there. We'll eat together, if that's okay. Is the Cosmopolitan a virgin?
You're free to eat here, and now it has alcohol in it.
I was surprised that she hadn't called me first. She had my cell phone number. Instead, she called me through the restaurant. There was no need. Kenny moved over to my table and took a long drink from the glass the waitress set down. We ordered food and chatted about how his mom never canceled plans before. As the meal progressed, I noticed that Kenny was getting pale and sweaty. Just before we considered ordering dessert, he toppled out of the chair. "I need an ambulance!" He looked bad. He was convulsing on the floor, and when the ambulance came, they bundled him onto a gurney and I followed them to the hospital. They found that he had been poisoned. The police questioned me while he was sleeping. I explained what we'd been doing, and the food we'd ordered to the table. They called the restaurant and had all the glasses and plates from our table were sent to forensics. Kenny was awake, but sore. They'd had to pump his stomach, and he was miserable.
Someone tried to poison me?
That's what the doctors are saying, but it doesn't make any sense. Who would try to hurt you? Just then, a police officer and a doctor came into the room.
Well, the poison has left your system entirely. If you'd delayed, you'd have died immediately, and the poison would have been untraceable by then. Do you have any idea who might do something like this? Does anyone have a vendetta against you? It wasn't for me. Pardon? At the dinner, I drank a cocktail that was meant for my fiancé, Minji. Oh? And where did this drink come from?
My dinner date canceled on me. She couldn't come for some reason or another and sent a drink to my table to apologize, but I don't drink alcohol. Kenny knows that, so he drank it for me, but it couldn't have been her. She called into the restaurant, so she wasn't there.
We'll review the security footage at the restaurant and get back to you. Until then, please do not talk to anyone. Give us the name of the person you were due to meet for the dinner date, please. It was my mother. Sorry, it's always hard when it's family. Rest well.
It was stressful waiting to hear back, so Kenny and I talked about our wedding. We made plans and talked about options, cakes and flowers, venues and guests. Neither of us wanted to talk about his mother, but then the police returned looking grim.
I have some bad news. We looked at the footage. It seems that your mother was at the bar when they made the drink and she spiked it. Meaning the drugs were intended to kill you, Minji, not me.
This gives me an idea. We should let her think that her plan worked. I could tell by the expressions on Kenny's and the police officers' faces that they were confused, but then I told them my idea and everyone seemed to be on board. In order to ensure that she would face judgment for her attempt to kill me, we needed to get her to confess, and that's when Kenny went over to her house. An hour later, Kenny drove over to her home and knocked on her door.
Oh hey, Kenny, what brings you here?
Oh, Mom, you won't believe the day that I've had.
Did you get some bad news?
No, actually. Quite the opposite. I mean, I don't know how else to say it, but Minji is dead. She went to meet some mysterious person at a restaurant and was poisoned.
Well, you don't seem too upset about it. I'm kind of surprised.
To be honest, she was kind of the wrong choice for me, you know? So whoever poisoned her did me a favor.
You really think so?
Yeah, besides, I think you were right. Maybe I should just try to find someone more like us. Someone white.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear you say that. Those Asian women are just trouble anyways. We'll find you someone white that will be a perfect match for you. I'm so happy that you came around to seeing reason.
I guess it just took me a bit longer than some people. Man, I wish I could thank whoever freed me from Minji, though.
Well, funny that you should say that because it was me.
Wait, what do you mean?
Well, when she called and said that you were getting married and then asked to meet, I knew I needed to do something drastic, and so I looked up different poisons online and found one that would work perfectly on her. Best part is that there's no way to trace it back to me.
Oh, but that's not true, Mom. After all, you were caught on videotape putting the poison in her drink, and now you've confessed to the crime as well.
It was at that moment that the police swarmed my mother-in-law's house and arrested her. Kenny had been wearing a wire the whole time, and the police had been listening. And now, with her confession, she was as good as cooked. Her trial was very short, as the evidence against her was overwhelming, and the judge quickly sentenced her to life in prison. He had decided that the fact that she had no remorse for what she had attempted to do. Once she was locked away, we were able to breathe easy and enjoyed, knowing that she had been punished for trying to steal our happiness from each other. As for her, she grew more and more miserable in prison. She constantly picked fights with her fellow inmates and nearly lost all of them. From what we heard, she spent a week in solitary confinement after she went into a rage when she saw the wedding invitation that we sent her. Maybe it had been in bad taste, but it did bring a smile to my face. Thanks for watching.
Here she is. Just like I said, she's quite the pretty young girl. She'll make a fantastic wife for you. Yeah, she will. I like it young. At least she hasn't been ran through. She is really pretty. But I won't pay more than $25,000. $25,000? That's not what we agreed on. You said that you would pay $40,000. What the hell is going on here? Dad, are you seriously trying to sell Emily? Be quiet, Sam. This guy is going to give us a small fortune for the girl. What are you talking about? Of course she is. She's my sister, and there's no way that I'll let you sell her to this fat monster. Hi, my name is Sam, and I was an only child, or at least I started off my life as one. Things changed after my mother left my father and I. At the time I was devastated as I didn't understand why she would just leave us, but when I got older, it began to make a lot of sense. You see, my father was a bit of an alcoholic, and he would go to the bars every night after work and spend nearly all of his paycheck there. On top of that, he would sleep with other women all the time and lie to my mother about where he was. After I found that out, I couldn't really blame her. After all, it wasn't like he would ever change. Although I had always wondered why she hadn't taken me with her, though. Years later, when I was 10, my father came home late one night with a bunch of people and had a small party at our house. They were up until the sun came up the next day, and they left a massive mess behind. I was tired, as I had barely been able to get any sleep since they had been making so much noise. But I knew that if I didn't start to clean up, that it would never get done, and so I began to tidy up the house as best as I could when I discovered a young girl sleeping on the couch under a pizza box. I was so confused as I didn't recall seeing her the night before, but here she was, sleeping on the couch. I rushed over to my father's room to wake him up and see if he knew anything about her. Dad! Dad! You won't believe what I found! There's a girl sleeping on the couch! Oh yeah, is she cute? Did she and I hook up last night? No, Dad. She's only like 4 or 5. This isn't one of your floozies. This is a child. Where did she come from? Huh. Oh yeah, that's your stepsister. Look after her. Huh. That's right. Well, you better go make her breakfast. And make me something to eat at the same time. I'm starving. And just like that, he rolled back over and went back to sleep. I was furious with him. I didn't know how to cook that many things, and I had no idea how to take care of another child. I was barely old enough to take care of myself. Angry, I went to the kitchen and made the one food that I knew how to make. A grilled cheese sandwich. And I made a few of them and offered one to the girl. Hi there, my name is Sam. Here, it isn't much, but it's food and you must be hungry.
Thank you, Sam. I'm Emily and I'm so hungry.
She took a few bites of the sandwich, and her eyes lit up with excitement.
This is the best sandwich I've ever had.
After that day, I did my best to keep her fed, and I watched over her. I was never sure when her mother was supposed to come back for her, but the days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months, and before I knew it. Emily had lived with my father and I for 2 years, before I finally began questioning whether or not her mother was ever coming back. In that time, my father hadn't changed at all, and continued to party and waste his money, as if he didn't have 2 children living at home with him. I did my best, though, and took care of Emily, and made sure that she was safe, and that once she was old enough, that she started going to school. In a weird way, we became family, and even though she was my said step-sister, I got to thinking of her as my baby sister, and she treated me like her older brother. It was kind of nice, especially since my real family was either absent or drunk all the time. I will clean neighbors' houses to make a couple of dollars and take care of Emily. And so the years began to roll by, and I kind of just forgot about Emily's mother ever coming back, and I just figured that we would probably just be a family for the rest of our lives. That is, until Emily turned 16. My father began acting very strange after her 16th birthday. I knew that he wasn't the kind of guy to do anything gross with what was essentially his own daughter. After all, he was a creep, but he wasn't that kind of creep. But there was something with the way that he was looking at her that made me feel very uncomfortable all the same. It wasn't until he began bringing strange men around the house that I figured out exactly what he was planning. One day, he brought home a rather heavy-set man that was easily in his mid-40s and smelled like he hadn't bathed in days.
Here she is. Just like I said, she's quite the pretty young girl. She'll make a fantastic wife for you.
Yeah, she will. I like it young. At least she hasn't been ran through. She is really pretty. But I won't pay more than $25,000.
$25,000? That's not what we agreed on. You said that you would pay $40,000.
What the hell is going on here? Dad, are you seriously trying to sell Emily?
Be quiet, Sam. This guy is going to give us a small fortune for the girl.
What are you talking about? Of course she is. She's my sister, and there's no way that I'll let you sell her to this fat monster. And just like that, I kicked the creepy guy in between the legs and then grabbed Emily and ran out of the house. I didn't have much of a plan, but I knew that I had to get Emily out of that house before my dad did something really stupid. However, once we were a good distance from our house, I realized my mistake. Sorry, Emily, I didn't really plan this. I just knew we needed to get away from our dad as he had finally lost what little he had of his mind.
Sam, you have nothing to apologize for. Thank you for getting me out of that situation. I didn't know what to do, and you saved me and protected me just the way a true older brother would do. Thank you, Sam. I don't think I would have survived being that man's wife. He was just so gross.
At any rate, what was done was done. I used some of the money that I had saved off from my part-time job to rent us a hotel room until we came up with a better plan. We both had part-time jobs, but between going to school and only working a few hours every few days, our options were rather limited. That was when I hatched a brilliant plan. Hey Emily, I have a terrible idea. What if we head back home and convinced our dad that we changed our minds, but at the last minute, just take the creepy guy's money and run away instead? With $40,000, we could flee the country and have a fresh start somewhere else. What do you say? She reluctantly agreed, as she was worried that we wouldn't get away a second time, but she also knew that we had very limited options. And so, the next day, I went back home to smooth things over with my father and try to set the deal up.
What are you doing here? You have a lot of nerve.
I'm sorry, Dad. I wasn't thinking very clearly, and I just reacted without thinking about how much money that was on the table. Is that guy still interested? Because I'm sure I can convince Emily to come back, and then we can sell her off to him, but only if he comes with the money, so that we can see it before we give her over to him.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I'll call him up and tell him the deal is back on.
And so our father left and called the creepy guy up. Later that day, he came back over soon after Emily came home. Just as he was told, he brought the money, and as soon as we saw it, I once again kicked him as hard as I could and grabbed both Emily and the money and ran. Minutes later, my father was calling me on my phone and demanding that I come back with both the money and Emily.
Sam, you idiot. Bring them back now.
This isn't a guy you want to double-cross. Oh, and what's the worst that can happen? Are you going to call the cops?
Well, that is one option, yeah.
And tell them that you were trying to sell your daughter. I wonder how they'll react to that. His silence told me that he knew that he didn't have a leg to stand on, and so he just kept quiet and hung up. With the money in our hands, we quickly emptied our bank accounts and booked a train to the next neighboring country and left our father behind. The money, of course, didn't last long, but it did help us to get settled. And once we finished school, we both got pretty good jobs and were able to establish ourselves. I became a lawyer, and Emily became a police detective. One day, she came over to my house and had surprising news for me.
Hey, Sam. I found something out today.
Yeah. And what would that be?
Well, I was curious and I did some digging, and unfortunately I found out that my mother had passed away years ago. But I managed to find out that not only is your mother still alive, but that she has been searching for you for years now. Apparently, her family had forced her to leave your father so that she could make enough money to support the two of you. However, before she could go and get you away from your father, she had an accident and has been in a coma for years, and only a couple weeks ago, she woke up. She's coming over tonight to meet you. Isn't that something?
I was so confused as I didn't know how to feel. On the one hand, I now knew that she hadn't abandoned me on purpose, but she was still a stranger to me. When she showed up, though, all my confusion melted away as I embraced her. It felt as if she hadn't ever left, and I knew that we now had a second chance and could have a truly fresh start. It felt amazing to expand my small family, and the best part was that my mother embraced Emily as if she were her own daughter. It had taken years, but it felt like our family was finally whole. From time to time, Emily and I would look up to see what our dad had been up to, and he had only become worse after we left. The creepy guy was now forcing our father to slowly pay him back, and he was little more than a slave to the man, doing odd jobs for him as payment for the money that we had ran off with. We even heard the man and his boys once beat my father and broke his arm. Our father was not in very good shape, and that creepy guy was working him to death. However, no matter how bad things sounded, I just couldn't feel any sympathy for him. As for us, our lives were beginning to really feel complete. Both Emily and I have since gotten married and have even begun to have children, which makes our mother extremely happy. Being a grandmother has given her a chance to spend time with children that she was denied when she had been struck down with that coma. Now I'm not exactly proud of what we had to do to make this life possible, but if I had to go back in time and make that choice again, I wouldn't do anything different. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.
Hi there. My name is Claire, and I know that I look well put together, but I wasn't always this way. In fact, growing up, my family was very poor. My mother and father did their best, and there was always food on the table, but we never bought anything that wasn't from a secondhand store. It was just the four of us. My mother and father, and then there was myself and my sister Mary. We did have extended family, but we never met them. When I was old enough, my mother told me that the reason that this was the case was due to the fact that she was black and that my father was white. I didn't really understand it, but since we didn't see them, it really wasn't a problem. After all, our parents were different, and my sister and I were different as well. She looked like our father and had very pale skin, while mine was more like our mother's and very dark. So for us, it always just seemed normal. That is, until that fateful night. My parents had gone to a party at a friend's house, and on their way home, they got into a car accident. They were rushed to a hospital, but unfortunately passed away soon after. At the time, my sister was 13 and I was 11. My sister and I were terrified. We didn't know what would become of us. Since we didn't have any family present to claim us, we were sent to a foster home. I still remember crying my eyes out and not understanding what was going on. We were there for a week when we were told that they had good news for us, and that they had tracked down our grandparents. Both my sister and I were shocked to hear this. We weren't sure how to feel, really. Part of us were excited to meet them, but we were worried as they were complete strangers. When they arrived, we saw that they looked exactly like our father. Their faces were so warm and inviting. They greeted Mary affectionately and kissed her on her head dozens of times. However, when their eyes fell on me, their smiles faded, and they didn't even come over and hug me, even though I wanted them to more than anything. After a few hours, they left, and my sister and I were wondering what to make of the visit. But the next day, our grandparents sent a car. We assumed that it was there to collect both of us, but the looks on the faces of our foster parents said otherwise. Neither of them were very happy.
Girls, your grandparents sent a car to pick you up. But we have some bad news.
Bad news? We don't understand.
Well, the car is only here to pick up Mary. I'm very sorry, Claire, but they only filled out paperwork to adopt Mary.
I couldn't believe what I was hearing. As if losing our parents wasn't bad enough, now my sister and I were going to be separated as well? That night, I cried myself to sleep. I had never been alone before, and I didn't know how to handle it. I was devastated, and I couldn't help but feel that I was worthless and garbage. The years that followed were hard. I was bounced around from foster home to foster home. Some were better than others, but none ever felt truly like home. Nothing ever felt as happy and secure as how I felt with my parents and sister growing up. I did keep in contact with my sister through email, though. The messages that we sent to one another were a beacon of hope in a very dark time in my life. She told me stories about how our grandparents were spoiling her, giving her everything that she could ever want. She had more clothes than she could ever wear. She always had the best computer and went to a private school and ate all the best foods. I couldn't help but feel jealous. My grandparents were exceptionally wealthy and spent their money freely on my sister. While I lived in poverty since my foster parents never really cared for me that much, more than once I tried to send letters or emails to my grandparents begging them to adopt me as well. I tried my best to make them understand that I would be happier living with them and that I would be a picture-perfect addition to their family, that it was so unfair that they had separated my sister and I, but they never responded. My sister tried to beg them to adopt me as well, but they would get angry to the point where they were almost violent when she did, and so she stopped mentioning it. I knew that it weighed on her, but I also knew that it wasn't her fault. After I graduated from high school, I tried once more to reach out to them. I wasn't sure if I could get any scholarships, and I was desperate to still be able to go to college. They had more than enough money to help me pay for school, but I also knew that it was a long shot. The day after I sent the email, they finally responded to me.
Hello, Claire. Congratulations on being accepted to college. We understand that you are indeed our grandchild. However, that alone does not mean that we are obligated to help you. You are a reminder of our son's poor decision to marry someone inferior to our standing. Please don't ever write to us again. To us, you are nothing but a bad memory.
Her words hurt badly, and I spent many nights crying, thinking that I would never be good enough for them. Thankfully, though, I did receive a letter saying that I had been awarded a full scholarship from a prestigious law firm. With my school completely paid for, I focused hard on my studies and years later graduated at the top of my class. I was even offered an entry-level position at the very law firm that had given me the scholarship. It turned out that the lead partners had all come from similar circumstances as myself. For the first time in a long time, I felt a part of a family, a part of a group of people that not only understood the pain that I had gone through, but also accepted me despite of it. As the years drew on, I rose up in the firm and even met my husband there. The two of us eventually became partners in the firm, and we now live in a mansion with 3 beautiful children of our own. My sister, however, chose a different path, and while I am proud of the woman that she has become, she chose to follow her passions, and she became a teacher. I know that it makes her very happy, and I even assisted her in finding a home that she could afford since I make quite a bit more than her. Things were finally going well for me, but then I got an email from my grandparents. Apparently, they had made some poor investments, and they were going to be forced to sell their home to pay for their debts. They had squandered their fortune and were desperate.
Hello, Claire. We are very sorry for how we have treated you in the past. We have come to see that we blamed you for something that wasn't even your fault. Please, could you find it in your heart to forgive us for our poor choices? We would love to get to know you and your husband and our great-grandchildren as well. Please forgive us.
I instantly knew why they had written the letter. They had no other options and had only reached out to me because they were screwed otherwise. My sister couldn't afford to have them stay with her. After all, although her home was quite lovely, there was no room for them, and my sister didn't make enough money to help them get a new home of their own. On top of that, the closer that my sister and I became, the more distant she became with our grandparents. Neither of us could forgive them for separating us all those years ago. And so, just as they had done to me, I wrote them back. Hello, I am very sorry to hear of your plight, and that you are having such a hard time right now. However, I cannot help but feel that it is all well-deserved. I can't tell you how many nights I fell asleep crying because you left me alone in foster care, while you gave my sister everything in the world. And all because of the color of my skin. So no, I won't be helping you, and I would greatly appreciate that you never write to me again. They of course ignored the last part, and kept sending emails begging me to reconsider, but I had no interest in entertaining them. Later I found out that they had been forced to move into a retirement home, and that the only one that they could afford was terrible. The staff were mean to the residents, and they were fed the blandest and poorest foods. My sister would visit them on the holidays, but only for very brief visits, and they constantly pleaded with her to speak to me and get me to take them in, but I only ever laughed these requests away. After all, they had abandoned me, and I had been forced to do everything the hard way. I had worked hard to get an education, and then a fantastic job. Then I found someone that truly loved me for who I am, and we have made a wonderful family. We both know what it's like to not have anything, and so we make a point to tell our children every day that they are loved and treasured. As far as I'm concerned, my grandparents are exactly where they deserve to be. Thanks for watching.